So hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy previous year questions analysis. Now in this session we will be discussing few previous year questions that were asked by UPSC in the 2022 mains examination. So the first question that we are going to start here, it is about the photochemical smog. Okay, so the question says that discuss in detail the photochemical smog, emphasizing its formation, effects and mitigation. The second part of the question, explain the 1999 Gothenburg Protocol. Now the Gothenburg Protocol was initiated in order to prevent the air pollutants. Okay, so that also includes the photochemical smog. Now in this context you have to understand how photochemical smog is being formed. Now in major cities, even in cities like Delhi, photochemical smog is one of the most pressing challenge. Because of this photochemical smog, people have been suffering of various health related problems. Now in this context, so please understand what is photochemical smog. Now photochemical smog is also called with the name Los Angeles smog. Okay, so please remember it is also called as Los Angeles smog. And this photochemical smog is categorized as type of a air pollution. Okay, so this is a one sort of or one type of a air pollution. How the photochemical smog is formed? The photochemical smog formation is actually the result of reaction of solar radiation with the airborne pollutant mixture. So what are those airborne pollutants? So they include nitrogen oxides and other volatile organic compounds which are result of the hydrocarbons. Now in this context we need to understand how the photochemical smog is actually formed. Since the question has asked us to write or discuss in detail the formation of or mechanism of photochemical smog. Now the formation of photochemical smog is closely related to the concentration of primary pollutants. Now in atmosphere there are few primary pollutants and the secondary pollutants. The primary pollutants include oxides of nitrogen. So what are those oxides of nitrogen? They include nitric oxide, nitrogen dioxide and nitrous oxide. So please be careful, it is very important. They may ask these questions in prelims examination, because they are type of air pollutants and UPSC also has the history of asking these pollutants in the prelims examination. Now oxides of nitrogen include nitric oxide, nitrogen dioxide and nitrous oxide as well. Okay, so and other volatile organic compounds. So all these factors are categorized as oxides of nitrogen. Now in this context there are some secondary pollutants as well. So what are those secondary pollutants? Aldehydes, tropospheric ozone and other pollutants. So these are categorized as the primary pollutants and secondary pollutants, and they are mostly responsible for the photochemical smog formation in the atmosphere. Now in this context, photochemical smog usually appears, it is initiated by the nitrogen oxides. We already know about that. Nitrogen oxides and other pollutants are responsible for the formation of photochemical smog. Now how the mechanism usually takes place? So absorbing the visible ultraviolet energy of the sunlight, so these nitrogen oxides form nitric oxide. Okay, so they will be converted into nitric oxide to free atoms of oxygen. So oxygen atoms will be freed, so which then combine with the molecular oxygen, and this molecular oxygen will be converted into the ozone. Okay, so ozone further intensifies the formation of photochemical smog. However, with hydrocarbons means that vehicular emissions, industrial emissions. So hydrocarbons are primarily fossil fuels. So with hydrocarbons, certain other organic compounds, sunlight, various chemical reactions takes place to form the photochemical smog. Now this is how the photochemical smog is usually formed over the atmosphere. Now after that we need to understand the effects of photochemical smog. So what are the effects of the photochemical smog? So firstly, understand, so chemicals within the photochemical smog or the pollutants present in the smog combined with the hydrocarbons. So hydrocarbons generally means vehicular emissions and even the industrial emissions. So these are called as hydrocarbons. So when they combine with the hydrocarbons, they form molecules and they very often cause eye irritation. Now, when you are living in cities like Delhi and during the peak years of pollution, when you go out, you usually feel that your eyes are irritating. Okay, and you will also feel some, fatigue like conditions. So all these factors are majorly because of the pollutants. Now, the ground level ozone can prove extremely toxic to human beings. Okay, so the ground level ozone will be very toxic to human beings, and there are other negative symptoms also which are associated with the photochemical smog. So they include decreased vision, shortness in breath. So apart from that, so because of the photochemical smog and the other atmospheric pollutions, acid rain usually takes place. Now, acid rain is different from the normal rain. Acid rain generally contains several harmful and toxic chemicals, so that could have a serious implications on human health as well as environment and ecology. So because it very often causes skin cancer in human beings, and even the productivity of crops in the agriculture may be declined because of the acid rain. So I hope you all know about the eutrophication. So eutrophication of lakes is very often heard in UPSC. Now, eutrophication involves that excessive amount of nutrients present in the lakes and other ponds. Now, eutrophication will make the biological oxygen demand is high. So therefore, creation of a more and more dead zones, the health of these wetlands will also gets impacted because of the eutrophication. And after that, we need to talk about the mitigation measures. So what are the mitigation measures we need to take in order to prevent the negative consequences of the photochemical smog? Now, firstly, we need to talk about the catalytic converters. So what are these catalytic converters? Catalytic converters have to be used in each of these vehicles so that they convert the harmful effluents or the harmful emissions into less harmful emissions. So catalytic converters reduces vehicular emissions of nitrogen, carbon dioxide and other hydrocarbons. So remember, these hydrocarbons are primarily responsible for the air pollution and even the photochemical smog. So when we use catalytic converters, that significantly reduces the emissions of harmful gases. Secondly, we need to talk about the reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Because of vehicular emissions and even the industrial emissions and excessive use of fossil fuels, what generally happen, the greenhouse gas emissions have been significantly increasing, and that also comes up with the higher climate change. Now, in this context, we need to reduce the greenhouse gases and other urban emissions. So in order to do that, we need to use the biofuels. We need to excessively depend on biofuels and renewable energy sources. So what are those renewable energy sources? We need to depend on wind energy, solar energy. So other renewable energy technologies we can depend on. So after that, there should be a cleaner options for vehicles. So vehicles should not just depend on hydrocarbons or fossil fuels. Rather, we need to switch at a faster pace or make a transition to a faster pace to hydrogen powered and electric vehicles. Okay, so therefore in this context, we need to develop the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure for the electric vehicles. So after that, the second part of the question has also asked about the Gothenburg Protocol. Now, what exactly is the Gothenburg Protocol? Now, Gothenburg is a city. It is located in country Sweden. Okay, so this protocol has envisioned to abate the acidification, eutrophication and ground level ozone. Remember, these are the major pollutants. These are the major hydrocarbons. They are responsible for the photochemical smog and resultant air pollution. So in this context, the Gothenburg Protocol has been adopted in order to abate these pollutants, and the countries of UNECE, Gothenburg, Sweden, and it was adopted in the year 1999, right? So second point is that the Gothenburg Protocol is a multi-effect protocol. Okay, so it is not just focused on one objective, rather it has multiple objectives with respect to the air pollution. In fact, the Gothenburg Protocol has also set up emission ceilings for 2010, okay, for four pollutants particularly. So what are those pollutants? So they include sulfur, nitrous oxide, volatile organic compounds, and ammonia. So these are very important four pollutants where the Gothenburg Protocol has set a specific ceiling. Now after that, these ceilings were usually negotiated on the basis of scientific assessments of pollution effects and abatement options. Now when you write the conclusion for this answer, so you can just write currently the protocol, the Gothenburg Protocol is under negotiation for a revised protocol, since climate change and greenhouse gases have been emitting at a faster pace, and we are also changing the environmental laws, and the countries have announced the net zero targets. So therefore we are still negotiating the Gothenburg Protocol for a revised protocol. Now this Gothenburg Protocol has also updated in the year 2012 to include particulate matter and black carbon. So please remember, the black carbon is a very potent greenhouse gas element. Apart from that, particulate matter 2.5 and particulate matter 10 is also very well known for air pollution in cities. Okay, so this is all about the photochemical smog and the Gothenburg Protocol. So the next question that we are going to discuss is about the cloud burst. Okay, so explain the mechanism or occurrence of cloudburst in the context of Indian subcontinent and discuss with two recent examples. So please understand, in recent times cloudburst has become a most common phenomenon in Himalayas. Okay, for example, you may have heard about the Uttarakhand floods, so the devastation it has created. So apart from that, in Himachal Pradesh also you have seen such a cloud burst. So in this context, due to climate change, the intensity of these cloud burst and cloud burst associated disasters were becoming more and more common. Now in this context, we need to understand how the cloud burst usually forms. So please remember, if you observe the trend of the UPSC, so this question was asked in the year 2022. Okay, so in a similar way, in the year 2023, what UPSC has asked was the failure of dams. So similar to this question where UPSC has asked to write us two examples, this year also in 2023 also UPSC has asked us to write two examples of dam failures. So therefore in this context, UPSC has been following the trend, and that is why it is important that you need to refer to the previous year questions. You have to answer the previous year questions. In that way you will get important insights and what is UPSC has been asking and how to write those answers. Now in this context, please understand what is a cloudburst. A cloudburst is usually a localized phenomenon. It does not have a huge extent. It does not have a large extent. Rather, it is a localized but a very intense or heavy rainfall activity over a small area. Okay, so short spells of a very heavy rainfall over a small geographical area can cause a widespread destruction. So imagine a small area where it has been receiving a continuous and huge amount of heavy downpour. So you can imagine the destruction that it causes in that particular area: loss of lives, loss of infrastructure, and even the loss to livestock. So therefore, this cloudburst is a phenomenon most commonly seen in hilly areas, for example in Western Ghats and in Himalayas. So therefore it is a most common phenomenon in hilly areas. Now why it is most common in hilly areas, we will understand about that. So after that, so understand the specific definition or basic definition of cloudburst. Generally, the definition involves a rainfall of 10 centimeters or more in an hour. So 1 hour, a rainfall of 10 centimeters or more over roughly 10 kilometer into 10 kilometer area. Okay, so 10 kilometer into 10 kilometer area and more than 10 centimeters of rainfall over an area is actually classified as cloudburst event. Okay, so this is the definition of cloudburst. Now, when you look at the cloudburst, particularly in the Indian subcontinent, they are not uncommon. Okay, so they are like a regular phenomenon because of the climate change. So we can observe these cloudbursts particularly during the monsoon months. And please also understand, most of these cloudbursts usually takes in Himalayan states. Why in Himalayan states? Because of suitable local topography, wind systems, temperature gradients, so between the lower and upper atmosphere. So all these factors have been facilitating the occurrence of such huge or heavy cloudburst in the Himalayan regions. Now, through this diagram, we will be trying to understand how the cloudburst usually takes place. This is the mechanism of cloudburst. Generally, winds takes place moisture. Winds carry moisture with them. So moist air encounters a mountain or hill and it forced to rise. Now, when wind is taking moisture with it, so generally when it encounters a mountain, that is generally takes place in the Western Ghats with respect to the southwest monsoon. So we all know about the southwest monsoon. It strikes Kerala first and particularly the Western Ghats. Okay, so there was a rain shadow region also in the Western Ghats. This can be called as a rain shadow region, and this region experiences heavy rainfall. So therefore, in this context, when it hits or when it encounters a hill or mountain, it actually forced to rise. In the second phase, the rising air, when air rises, so it cools down, because we all know that with the altitude, temperature usually declines with the altitude. Okay, so temperature usually declines with the altitude. So that this rising air cools and condenses, clouds will develop over an area. Okay, clouds will develop. So in this third phase, the violent upward flow of air. So since this is a violent upward flow or movement of air prevents condensing raindrops. Okay, so this will prevent the condensation and falling to the ground. The rain falling to the ground will be prevented. So in the fourth step, so lack of upward air prevents dissipation of moisture. Okay, so in the fourth step, what generally happens, that there's a lack of upward air. Now this lack of upward air results in it prevents in dissipation of moisture. So fifth phase, whole of the stored water falls at a one single time over one particular area in the fifth phase. Secondly, so when these mountains have a steep slopes, because of such a heavy rainfall, this huge amounts of water flows at a rapid phase, and this is how the cloudburst usually takes place, and this phenomenon is called as orographic lifting. What is the orographic lifting? So orography is a mountain, and orographic lifting is lifting of these winds because of the moisture, because of the mountain. And then once a cloudburst takes place, because of the huge heavy steep slopes of these mountains, excessive water flows down, and that causes havoc and destruction. So in this context, please understand the mechanism as well as the occurrence of these cloudbursts. So how these cloudbursts usually occur. So it is one of the most important aspects of cloudburst. It is characterized as orographic lift. Okay, so orographic lift is primary cause of the cloudburst. How? Because we have understood the mechanism in the previous slide. Okay, so secondly, the terrain region, that is the orographic barrier. Okay, so this can be considered as the orographic barrier, and this pushes the saturated clouds. Saturated clouds means the clouds already having a huge quantity of moist air. Now this pushes the saturated air clouds or moisture laden mass upwards along the mountains. Okay, so this will push the moisture laden air mass upwards along the mountains. So next, the moist air mass is rapidly pushed up. So it will be rapidly pushed up and it reaches a relative humidity of 100%. So it carries the maximum amount of humidity with it. So the air mass is completely saturated with water and cloud formation generally starts. So when it pushed up here, a cloud formation usually takes place. Okay, so this rapid upward movement of warm or moist winds forms the cumulonimbus clouds. So this results in formation of a cumulonimbus clouds, and finally eventually, because of its height, the cumulonimbus clouds, and it's carrying maximum humidity, so that will result in heavy or intense rainfall over a very short area. Okay, so that is 10 into 10 kilometer area over 10 centimeters of rainfall, and this heavy or intense rainfall through these steep slopes would result in massive destruction. Okay, so it shed water with a great strength and velocity. So water with such a great strength and velocity would make the movement of the water down the slope very aggressive. So that creates a huge destruction and damage to the different regions where people are usually living. Now the question has been asked us to explain this with two recent incidents of cloudburst that took place in India. So first example is the cloudburst that took place in Salem district of Tamil Nadu. In Salem district of Tamil Nadu also the cloudburst takes place apart from Himalayas. Okay, so because of this cloudburst, 213 millimeter of rainfall had occurred in a single day. So ponds in that area filled up, and there is a pond called Tennakudi Palayam Lake. Okay, so this lake has also filled up, Tennakudi Palayam Lake. So the Vashishta Nadi became flooded and making Attur check dam brim with the water. Okay, so even though there was no massive casualty with this cloudburst, but this is one example of recent cloudburst. And after that, we need to talk about the cloudburst that took place in Himalayan region. So the most recent cloudburst occurred in July 2022 in Himalayas. So this took place near the holy cave shrine of Amarnath. Okay, that was in Jammu and Kashmir. So in which at least 16 people were killed and many were still missing because of this cloudburst. Now in conclusion, we can write that can we predict the cloudburst? According to experts, it is very difficult to predict the cloudburst because the cloudburst as a phenomenon takes place very quickly. So because of this reason, we cannot suddenly or immediately predict these cloudbursts. However, Indian Meteorological Department usually looks into the cloudburst and forecasting related to floods and these cloudbursts. So it forecasts rainfall events well in advance. Indian Meteorological Department usually predict the rainfall well in advance. But however, the problem here is that the IMD may not be able to predict the quantum of rainfall, so how much rainfall usually took place. So in fact, no meteorological agency actually predict the quantum of rainfall. So with the cloudburst, we experience excessive rainfall, but no meteorological department or agency cannot usually predict the quantum of rainfall. So the forecast can be usually about light, heavy or very heavy rainfall, even cyclones, but weather scientists do not have the capability to predict exactly how much rain is likely fall at a given place. So that is the major disadvantage in predicting these cloudbursts. Additionally, these cloudbursts are for a relatively large geographical area. So whenever we are forecasting about the rainfall or the very heavy rainfall, so these forecasts are based on the very large area. But the problem with cloudbursts, they took place on a very small area. So that is the another major disadvantages in forecasting of these cloudburst. However, as they zoom in over small areas, the forecasts get more and more uncertain. When we zoom in for finding out these cloud bursts, the forecasts will become more and more uncertain. So therefore, adequate preparedness in areas like Himalayas and other vulnerable areas for the mitigation efforts. So undertaking the mitigation efforts are also necessary, and awareness among the people should also be increased in this regard. Okay, so this is all about the cloud burst. And the next question, so that is part of the economy paper 2. It is related to the internal security section. Now the question here asking us about the discuss the types of organized crimes. So there are different organized crimes, and describe the linkages between terrorist organizations and these organized crime networks that exist at the national and transnational level. Now, what do you mean by the transnational level? Transnational level generally means that the presence of these organized crime networks across different countries, particularly because of globalization. Because of the globalization, these transnational networks are able to operate with ease. Now in this context, so there are different organized crimes. Okay, so what are those? Terrorism, terror financing, money laundering, illegal money. So here a linkage has been established with the organized crime and terror networks. The organized crimes usually raise money in a illegal manner, and this illegal money will be used for the financing terror activities, and the money will be sent or converted into white money through money laundering, and this money laundering, the money which is sent through money laundering, will be used for terror financing and other terrorist related activities. Okay, so you can draw such a flow diagram in your answer. Now in this context, so please understand, there was a convention, UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. So it has defined the organized crime groups in two ways. Okay, so UN Convention Against the Transnational Organized Crime. Okay, so in the first definition, a group of 3 or more persons, so that was not randomly formed, existing for a period of time, and acting in concert with the aim of committing at least one crime punishable by at least 4 years incarceration. Okay, so incarceration. So this is one such definition that was given by UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. See, please understand, this UN Convention on Transnational Organized Crime was also asked by UPSC in prelims examination in the year 2020. So therefore, so you can observe or identify a kind of a convergence between prelims and mains examination of what UPSC has been asking. So secondly, in order to obtain or directly, indirectly financial or other material benefit. So this is also defined definition of an organized criminal group given by United Nations Convention against transnational organized crime. So organized crimes are usually done with the motive of monetary gains by illegal means. So organized crimes are transnational in nature. Okay, so they are transnational. So their presence is not concentrated in or located in one country, but they are spread throughout different countries. So their presence is great threat for the country's internal security and the sovereignty as well. Now India is one of the country which has been facing worst consequences due to the terrorism, particularly cross-border terrorism, radicalization by the state and non-state actors. Okay, so now in this context, please understand the link between organized crime and terrorism. So firstly, terrorism and organized crimes. So organized crimes generally involves money laundering, drug trafficking or drug trade, weapons trade, human trafficking or fake currency. So these crimes are categorized as organized crimes and they are conjoined twins. Okay, so terrorism and organized crimes are actually considered as conjoined twins. They usually pose a great threat for the world through their syndicate and other deadly effects. Okay, so this is the first point. Secondly, so in order to carry out a terrorist activity, they require a lot of money. or so this is a basic understanding. So they require a lot of money. So therefore in this context, terrorists usually engage in other organized crime related activities. Okay, so what are the crime related activities? For example, we can talk about the Taliban, where it has been cultivating the drugs. It has involved in drug trafficking. So similarly, we need to talk about the ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and it used oil trade to finance itself. Okay, in this way they carry out the crime. So they carry out the organized crime. So terrorists engage in organized crime to find or fund their terrorist activity. So organized crime is the main source of, or it is one of the main source to generate money for these terrorist activities. However, as we have already discussed that the terrorist activities and the organized crime are usually the transnational nature. Okay, so because of this reason, they host terrorists and create opportunity for the growth in new areas. So they not just engage in the terrorist activities, but they also engaged in several organized crime networks. So because that helps them finance the terrorist activities. So terrorist groups are usually establish a network of organized criminal groups for transferring the money. Okay, so transferring money through money laundering. So organized crime groups, we understood the definition of organized crime groups. So these organized crime groups provides smuggled arms, explosives to terrorist organizations in exchange of terrorist groups providing protection and drugs to these organized groups. Okay, so generally these organized groups undertake human trafficking, drug trafficking under the ambit of these terrorist organizations. So because of this reason, they are called as conjoined twins. So we can also say that they have a largely symbiotic relationship. What is symbiotic relationship? So for symbiotic relationship generally involves that one benefiting the other. So this is the symbiotic relationship, and the strong presence can be seen in the areas having ineffective governance also. Okay, so their large presence, for example, if there is an ineffective governance in any country, then we can find the presence of terrorist organizations and other organized crime networks in order to take advantage of the ineffective governance. However, but all organized crime is not a terrorist act, but not all terrorist acts are considered as a organized crime. Okay, so you have to understand this distinction. However, there are certain examples, they show the relationship between the organized crime and terrorism. So the first example we need to talk about is the Northeast India itself. So in Northeast India, extortion of money is considered as, or is the fundamental basis for funding all forms of terrorism. So not generally terrorism, rather we can call it insurgency in the Northeast. Okay, so extortion of money has been financing the insurgency activities in addition. So apart from extortion, we also talk about the kidnapping. Okay, so and even the terror funding and spreading the terror ideology or the terrorist ideology has also been taking place in the Northeast. So this is the first example, and the second example we need to talk about is Jammu and Kashmir. The counterfeit currency is a major challenge that we have been, or security agencies or the intelligence agencies have been facing, because the counterfeit currency is being used for funding terrorism or terrorist activities. So in this context, money laundering usually plays a significant or very important role. So how money laundering takes place? Through hawala transactions. Okay, so hawala is another form of money laundering. So through these hawala transaction takes place swiftly and effectively in Kashmir, and that have been funding terrorist activities and even radicalizing the local youth. So after that, the Maoist terror movements in the left wing extremism belts in the central India, so they also usually finance their activities through extortion and even the drug trafficking. Okay, or drug trade, and it is a very common phenomenon in these left-wing extremism belts. So they have also indulged in robberies of banks to fund their movement. So these are the ways through which we can expect the linkages between the terrorist organizations and other organized crime networks. So while writing conclusion, you can simply stress on the fact that while there are several instances of collaboration between terrorist organizations and the organized crime network groups, however, the nature of these linkages can vary depending on specific group and context involved. So maybe we can expect that few terrorist organizations have a less collaboration or less linkage with these organized crime networks, or a few terrorist organizations, they are located in different parts of the world, they have the extensive linkages with the organized crime networks. Okay, so they usually depend on the group and the context and their ideology as well. Okay, so these are all the questions for today's discussion, and tomorrow also we will discuss few more previous year questions. So they are very important. Once you understand how to structure these answers, you will write the best and better answers. So thank you so much, and if you like the video, please hit the like button and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.